we are.
And we are live.
We are live, and this is a continuation of Senate Health and Welfare on March 1st. And welcome all the folks with us on Zoom. And what we'll do is the committee's going to introduce themselves once so that you each know who's here. And then we will welcome you to give your testimony. So we'll start with Senator Hurd.
I'm sorry. I'm good morning. I'm Ruth Hardy, Senator from the Addison District.
I'm Terry Williams, Senator from Rutland County.
Jenny Alliance, Chair of the committee from Chittenden Southeast.
Good morning, Dave Weeks, Rutland County.
Hi everyone, Martine Gulick, and I live in Burlington and I represent Chittenden Central.
Okay, so thank you. We do have some time for you. We're going to ask you to be, good about delivering your testimony and look forward to hearing it. We'll start with Amanda Klinger, who is here. Introduce yourself for the record, and then we welcome hearing you.
So can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect.
We'll turn it up, then we'll hear you fine.
Good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, we're good.
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay with everyone. Oh,
Yeah.
It looks like I'm not able to.
Yeah, you can.
Perfect. Thank you. Let me.
Amanda, are you in Paris?
Am I in Paris? Is that what you asked?
Yeah.
No, Washington, D.C. actually.
Oh, I see it. Okay, I just see the buildings off to the right.
I wish I was in Paris. Now you have me wanting to go there.
Yeah. Field trip.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate, sorry, thank you for bearing with me. It's always no matter 2 years in, technology is always hard. But Senator Lyons, Senator Weeks, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss S18. My name is Amanda Klingler. I'm an attorney at King & Spalding, and I'm here today to provide you with comments on S18 on behalf of my client, Reynolds American, and its affiliated tobacco companies. We share the state's interest in tobacco harm reductions, and we share the state's interest of keeping tobacco products out of the hands of youth. Rather than through the current proposed categorical ban of flavored products, these interests, however, can be better addressed by incorporating FDA's regulatory oversight of tobacco products into the bill. So we urge this committee to include an exemption from the flavor ban for products for which a marketing granted order, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, has been issued by FDA. This exemption makes sense from a public health perspective by virtue of the fact that by granting a marketing granted order, an MGO for a PMTA or pre-market tobacco product application, it means that FDA has determined that a product can be marketed in the United States because the agency has determined that the marketing of such product is appropriate for the protection of public health. In June of 2009, everyone knows that Congress passed the Family Smoking and Tobacco Control Act. At the time, a tobacco product was defined as any product made or derived from tobacco, and that is intended for the human consumption, including any component, part, or accessories of tobacco products. There was an enumerated list included in the act of which products FDA got immediate authority upon the effective date of the Tobacco Control Act. They were cigarette tobacco, roll your own tobacco, and smokeless tobacco. Any other tobacco products that FDA deemed to be subject to the act could be deemed at a later date through what we call the deeming rule. That's exactly what happened, and on August 8th, 2016, FDA's deeming rule became effective. FDA's deeming rule deemed all products that were made or derived from tobacco subject to FDA's authority. This included e-cigarettes, both closed and open systems, disposable products. We'll get to synthetic nicotine at a later date because that was a little bit of a loophole in the definition of tobacco products that has since been cured by Congress. So now FDA has regulation over all of these tobacco products. After the rule's effective date, deemed tobacco products could not be lawfully marketed in the US without FDA authorization. But because FDA realized the potential for tobacco harm reduction with some of these and some of these deemed products, FDA in its final rule and in subsequent guidance announced a compliance policy. Now, some dates have changed in the compliance policy for the second part, but basically where we are now is that FDA, the agency, stated that it generally would not take enforcement actions related to pre-market requirements if the product was on the market as of 8/8/2016 and a PMTA was submitted by September 9th, 2020. That's the date that shifted a little bit, but we're at September 9th, 2020. As you probably all are well aware, in 2020, in January of 2020, FDA then announced its enforcement priorities related to e-cigarettes and vapor products through a guidance document. This guidance document has been revised still in 2020, in April of 2020, but it outlined 3 enforcement priorities of the agency. 1, any flavored cartridge-based end products other than tobacco or menthol flavored end products would be subject to FDA enforcement priority. Any ends product that was offered for sale after September 9th, 2020, and for which the manufacturer had not submitted a PMTA, also subject to FDA enforcement priority. And then 3, any ends product that is likely to be used by youth, including products that imitate food packaging or marketing to youth, so really geared towards youth marketing. Importantly, with FDA's first enforcement priority that's in this list, FDA removed most flavored products from the market. Those products that were removed from the market or any new flavored products can only enter the US market if and only if FDA issues a marketing granted order on the PMTA. Or put differently, flavored cartridge-based end products other than tobacco and menthol flavors cannot be marketed unless and until FDA issues a marketing granted order. And if you guys have any questions, please stop me. Happy to answer anything in the middle. I forgot to say that at the beginning, but happy to answer any questions during or after the presentation. Just to put a finer point on the ends products, vapor products, and sort of this tobacco harm reduction that we all talk about and we hear about, FDA has, and the industry and other stakeholders have recognized that e-cigarettes, vapor products are critical to tobacco harm reduction. Then FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb declared, and you'll see this on the slide, envisioning a world where adults who still need or want nicotine could get it from an alternative and less harmful source needs to be the cornerstone of our efforts, speaking of FDA's efforts. And then relative to cigarettes, e-cigarettes are far down on what we call the risk continuum. The director for FDA's Center of Tobacco Products, Brian King, recently explained that e-cigarettes have markedly less risk than combustible cigarettes. Indeed, e-cigarettes are potentially 95% less harmful. FDA's commissioner said if you could take every adult smoker and fully switch them to e-cigarettes, that would have a substantial public health impact. FDA's process for granting these marketed granted orders, or once they review the PMTAs, requires manufacturers to satisfy strict scientifically evidence-based PMTA process. The PMTA submissions are voluminous and require submissions of large amounts of scientific data. For example, FDA requires PMTAs to include extensive design data, information about the manufacturing processes, and rigorous scientific analysis. It includes information concerning investigations, which have been made to show health risks of such tobacco products and whether tobacco products present less harm than other tobacco products. It includes information about components, ingredients, additives, constituents, and also marketing plan information. FDA's review process is not a rubber stamp. There's many steps, as seen on the slide, that go through FDA's review process. I'm not going to go through every step because I don't want to, one, bore the committee, and 2, you don't need to know every detail of every step for what we're talking about today. But you can see that there are different phases within the FDA's review process, and each phase requires FDA to make a determination to move on to the next phase. So you have the acceptance of review. This is really FDA looking at the application to make sure, one, the tobacco product falls within FDA's jurisdiction, and then also to ensure that that application satisfies all of the statutory and regulatory requirements that I just discussed with you all. You have the filing review, and really what's important here is that substantive review and action. that is when FDA really takes all of that scientific information, all of the data that was included in the application, and reviews it. In that review, they can order deficiency letters, which is a request for additional information if they feel that their scientific review needs more information, or if there's questions within their scientific review. And then the action, as we talked about, there's two separate actions: a marketing granted order letter or a marketing denial order letter. We'll talk about both of them and FDA's post-market in a second. But you'll see that FDA's review, as part of the review of the PMTAs, Congress directed FDA to weigh certain factors, including public health effects. They are to review the risk benefits to the population of a whole, including people who would use the proposed new tobacco product as well as non-users. So what's the risk benefit to that population? They're instructed to review whether people who currently use any tobacco products would be more or less likely to stop using such tobacco products if the new proposed products were available, whether people who currently do not use any tobacco products would be more or less likely to begin using tobacco products if the new product were to be available. In weighing these factors and ultimately issuing a marketing order, FDA must find that a PMTA provides scientific evidence and clinical data that demonstrate the marketing of the product is, again, appropriate for protection of public health. So in other words, any decision that FDA makes granting a marketing order, so issuing an MGO or a marketing granted order for a PMTA, means that the agency that is designated to protect the public health will have decided, based on its technical and scientific expertise, that the marketing of such a product is appropriate for the protection of public health. Conversely, the agency has to deny any PMTA if it finds that the marketing of that specific product, including flavored products, is not appropriate for the protection of public health. Congress entrusted FDA with making these decisions on the PMTA because of the agency's expertise in evaluating scientific evidence and making appropriate product-based determinations. So I mentioned post-marketing requirements before. I want to just mention that briefly again. Even after FDA issues a marketing granted order and a product is allowed to be marketed within the United States, the agency maintains extensive regulatory authority over the product. That includes the power to require post-marketing reporting and surveillance, to restrict marketing and promotional efforts that may appeal to youth, and to take enforcement actions against retailers that sell to minors with respect to these products. So the agency's authority and jurisdiction and regulation of tobacco products does not end just because it issues an MGO. It continues. Importantly, exempting the products for which FDA has issued a marketing order from the proposed favorite ban will not result in a loophole in what your proposal is. Since fiscal year 2020, FDA has taken action on over 99% of the 6.7 million PMTAs that were timely submitted, so submitted by that September 9th, 2020 date. As of September 2021, and this is old data, we're working with the agency to release new data, but you'll get the gist of what we're talking about here. FDA has issued marketing denial orders, so therefore the product is not allowed to be marketed for over 946,000 flavored end products. It's issued 23 marketing granted orders for ends products, all tobacco flavored products. So currently right now, there are no flavored products for which a timely PMTA was submitted, and FDA has been reviewing those cartridge-based end products that are allowed on the market. And the MGOs have all been with flavored tobacco products, with tobacco flavored products. FDA has also issued multiple enforcement actions. We've seen over 170 warning letters to firms, manufacturers, retailers that have over 17 million e-cigarettes products listed with FDA for which a PMTA has not been submitted. So trying to remove those products that didn't comply with the compliance policy guidance that I talked about before. Also, we're seeing examples of FDA now going after flavored tobacco products that remain on the market, synthetic and disposable products that certain synthetic and disposable products that also remain on the market and potentially do not comply with that compliance policy that I discussed before. So the bottom line is FDA is enforcing against flavored cartridge-based products that are still on the market in violation of its enforcement policy. And other ends products that are in violation of other regulations, regulatory requirements, things like that. Those public health determinations that FDA makes on a product by product basis when issuing a marketing granted order for a PMTA should be incorporated by the state. We believe that S18 should be amended to include an exemption from the flavor ban for products for which FDA has issued an MGO and determine the product again to be appropriate for the protection of public health. Again, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm happy to answer any questions now or whenever.
Thank you very much. I do have one question for you, and that is, can you send us your slides so we have it on record?
Yes, of course. I believe that Chris Rice, who I'm working with on this, has the slides and was sending it to the committee. So you should have them.
Thank you so much. Questions, committee? No questions, I guess, but thank you for the info, particular about the work that FDA is doing with regard to these products. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to BJ Mayer, Northeast Wholesalers Association. BJ, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to the committee. If you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen as well.
Go right ahead. Yep.
You should be here. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong button. All right. All right. Can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good morning again. As mentioned, my name is Vijay Mayer. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Wholesalers Association. Our association was founded to represent wholesale distributors in the Northeast who are facing common challenges. So our association encompasses Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and of course, Vermont. Many of our member companies have been family owned and operated for generations. Today, I'm here to voice our association's opposition to Senate Bill 18, a bill to ban the sale of flavored tobacco products in the state of Vermont. Throughout my presentation, I'll hit on three main points. First, passing SB 18 will not force individuals to quit smoking, but will instead drive cross-border sales. Second, inaction of this bill will drive sales to the illicit market that is dangerous for both retailers and adult tobacco consumers. Lastly, this bill is harmful to locally owned, tax-paying businesses and their employees, like my members. To demonstrate my points, we need to look no further than the state of Massachusetts. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts enacted a similar bill, and the results have been disastrous. As illustrated by publicly available data, menthol sales in Vermont grew 77%, and menthol sales in Rhode Island grew 37% after Massachusetts implemented their law. Additionally, data shows that from 2019 to 2022, an additional 17 million menthol packs were sold in New Hampshire and Rhode Island after implementation. This occurred at the same time smoking rates in New Hampshire fell 1.6%. There is no explanation for the increase in sales except cross-border sales. Massachusetts' mistakes cost the state nearly $337 million in business revenue. Proponents of this bill will say that this legislation is not about profit, but what they fail to mention is that due to cross-border dynamics, Vermont will still be paying for smoking-related illness, and that the only true outcomes are revenue loss and tax loss for the state and for our members. Someone just came in the waiting room, and I don't know if I see I'm allowed to admit them. All right, thanks.
Don't worry about it.
All right, thanks. Changing categories, we see the same story as it relates to moist snuff, often called dip. Flavored dip sales grew 13% in New Hampshire and 31% in Rhode Island. Meanwhile, non-flavored dip sales grew 262% in Massachusetts. This note is important because it proves that even if you restrict flavor options, consumers will simply migrate to a non-flavored option and ultimately not achieve the goal of forcing adults to change their behavior. Lastly, we must consider the unintended consequences of this bill as it relates to illicit sales. On screen, you'll see a quote from Dr. Mamalameni that proves an illicit market exists and comes in two forms. The first of which is cross-border, which we just discussed. The second is in the form of illicit sales. Today, the state excise tax on a pack of cigarettes is $3.08. In North Carolina, the product is only taxed at a rate of 45 cents. One carton, which is 10 packs of product from North Carolina, illegally smuggled into Vermont, yields profit of at least $26.30. Some brands ship master cases with as many as 50 cartons. That's $1,315 in profit for a single case. Imagine how many of those cases you can fit in the back of a U-Haul. This example is related to state tax evasion and does not even factor a potential flavor ban, which only exemplifies this issue. In fact, you can see on screen the U.S. Attorney's Office in North Carolina charged 25 individuals with smuggling. In that case, forfeiture including approximately 10,000 cartons of cigarettes, nearly $500,000 in cash, and also included more than 50 kilograms of marijuana on an illegal firearm. That case is only one example of the dangers affiliated with illicit cigarette sales. There are numerous others from around the country engaging in the same activity. In Massachusetts, more than 213,000 illegal electronic nicotine delivery systems, or vapes, were seized by state police and members of the multi-agency Illegal Tobacco Task Force. For sake of consumers, law enforcement, and the state as a whole, nicotine products must remain in the hands of the regulated market of legitimate businesses. To conclude, I want to reiterate these 3 points. 1, force consumers, the bill will not achieve its intended results. Instead, it will do the following. 1, force consumers across borders to purchase their preferred products where Vermont taxes are not collected. 2, force consumers into the illicit market where criminals are more than willing to sell dangerous products that are not regulated. And lastly, it will harm legitimate and law-abiding local multi-generational businesses who offer a wide variety of goods and services. For these reasons, I respectfully ask the committee to vote no on SB 18. At the Northeast Wholesalers Association, we believe government and business must work together to address the true root causes of the issues before us. But prohibition isn't the answer, never is. Thank you, and I'm available for questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. And I think it would be helpful if you could please send your slide deck along so we have it on record.
We have.
Of course, yep, and I sent them to Alex.
We've got it. We've got it. Alex just said that you did send it. So thank you for that. Questions committee. Okay, we're good.
Thank you.
And so we're going to move on to John Clark, the owner of the Alpine Mark Stowe, and you're here. Thanks for being here. So come right up to the hot seat.
Do you mind if I take this off?
No, please, go ahead. It's warm in here.
Is the mask required?
You know what, if you want to speak with it off, that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
we've had an outbreak in the building, and for members of our committee have been next to people who are now COVID positive, so we're just precaution.
Thank you for telling me.
Yeah, just so you know.
Okay, I'll put it back on when I'm finished.
Yeah, okay, terrific. Thanks for being here.
Sure, thank you. My name is John Clark. I own a convenience store in Stowe, and I'm a resident of Hyde Park. I'm speaking today to voice my strong opposition to the proposed tobacco flavor ban under consideration by Vermont. This legislation picks winners and losers in the tobacco and alcohol space. My business will be one of the losers, but today I also want to speak on behalf of my customers because they will be losers because they will lose their right of choice. At my business, behind the counter as required, we sell cigarettes, chewing tobacco, e-vape, and other tobacco products. My point of sale system makes it very easy to do. Because of this, we are very diligent in carding our customers. My point of sale system makes it very easy to do so using the barcodes on the back of the licenses. We card customers who purchase tobacco. Tobacco consumption for traditional products like cigarettes and chewing tobacco has been falling for some time. I've seen this over my 20 years in the business. Recently, marijuana was approved for sale in our state, including edibles like marijuana gummy bears. What audience do these products appeal to? The same audience at which this flavor ban is aimed. You don't want this ban to be hypocritical, do you? At the state liquor stores, flavored vodkas, gins, rums are available for sale. Yesterday at the state liquor store in Stowe, I found whipped cream and mango whipped cream flavored vodka, peppermint bark flavored rum, peanut butter flavored whiskey, and every fruit flavor imaginable. Vermont controls what is sold in these stores. Why does Vermont allow these products to be sold along with marijuana gummy bears and edibles, and then turns around and wants to ban flavored tobacco products? Is alcohol perfectly fine and good for your health while tobacco is not? This is hypocrisy. We have regular customers who buy Grizzly Wintergreen, Skoal Long Cut Mint, and flavored pipe tobacco. Similarly, we have customers who buy Newport and Marlboro menthol cigarettes. These customers are typically closer in age to me, I'm 65, than the audience this ban is intended to benefit. Why should they be denied products they have enjoyed for many years? The flavor ban in Massachusetts was a huge boon to New Hampshire businesses on the New Hampshire-Massachusetts border. The Vermont flavor ban will have a similar effect. New Hampshire businesses will be winners. Vermont businesses such as mine will be losers. I understand the intent of the flavor ban. However, if passed, there will be unintended consequences. Some customers will switch to unflavored tobacco products. Some will switch to something else. What will that be? I don't know. What are we willing to risk them switching to? Something that is less healthy for them than what is being banned. This is something to consider. To conclude, although the flavor ban is being considered for public health reasons, there are other unhealthy products that are not being considered for banning. This law will determine who wins in the regulated tobacco and alcohol space and who loses. Bigger winners will be New Hampshire's businesses who sell these products. My customers will lose their freedom of choice. The ban will incentivize those who use them to switch to something else, leading to more bans in the future and more regulation of an already highly regulated market. Bans don't work. It didn't work with prohibition. It didn't work with marijuana, and it won't work with a flavor ban. People will find workarounds and manufacturers will develop new products not subject to the ban. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And do we have your testimony?
No, but
Can you leave it? That'd be great.
I'd be happy to.
Can I ask you a question on obviously you're boots on the ground in terms of sales and marketing. What can you estimate what percentage of your sales actually the tobacco and flavors are responsible for? Or you sell vapes? Oh, yeah, okay. Do you have any idea of how that contributes to your bottom line?
It's fairly significant. I would say that, are you talking specifically about the flavored products?
Yeah.
I'd have to guess,
Okay. Well,
but I would say it's not an insignificant number. It would have an impact. It would have a financial impact on my business, and there would be repercussions. I would have to make decisions in terms of my employment and other benefits that I offer and other improvements I want to make to my business going forward. But I'd say maybe 30% if I had to pick a number.
where are you located?
I'm on Mountain Road in Stowe.
John, thank you for your testimony, and I think you made some really good points about flavored alcohol and cannabis. I will note that cannabis products are sold in a much more regulated atmosphere, but your point about the flavored alcohol is a good one. And last year when we had a bill that expanded the flavored alcohol, I was one of the few senators to vote against it because I shared your concerns. But the question I have for you is actually one about that a constituent of mine and I have been emailing about. She also owns a store similar to yours, and it was about training for employees and for carding customers and how that works, and what happens if one of your employees fails to card somebody, what happens to you as their boss owner? And can you explain how that
Yeah,
works?
I can.
And have you had any problems with it?
So I've owned this business for just over 20 years. I've passed many state stings, but I have failed a few. It has become a lot easier to card now because the POS system can read the barcodes on the back of the licenses.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
And so I do the training myself for every new employee that I hire. And we go through the questions, and I firmly tell everyone that if they want to deny a sale to a customer for any reason whatsoever, that's fully in their power to do so, and I support them in doing that. And I also have panic buttons in my business if the customer becomes so belligerent that we have to call the police. Now, fortunately, I've never had to do that, but I have gotten into some discussions with, most recently, a customer who had an expired license, and they were over 21, but the license was expired, and they wanted to argue with me about that. But yes, I do the training. And to answer your question, when you fail the test, the employee who fails is fined $100, and the business is fined. And then there's a series of progressions for multiple offenses. And eventually, this is going back about 15 years ago, I had two. And I lost the ability to sell alcohol and tobacco for a day. This is going back early in my ownership of the business.
So if the employee themselves fails it multiple times, do
It was different
their
employees.
fines increase as well?
I've never gotten to that
Oh,
point.
well, that's good to know. It's good to know that the POS system makes it easier.
It's much
Yeah.
easier.
Is that a required thing, or is it just because you have that system?
It's not required.
I wonder if my constituent has that system. I'll have to ask her.
Yeah, we have a Gilbarco system, which is really common. Yeah, and it reads the barcodes, and it'll pass you through the age question on the screen, and then allow you to make the sale.
Got it. That's
I
helpful.
know, I'm going to suggest that Senate Economic Development Committee contact you should they take up the bill on purchase, use, and possession, because you have a system that seems to work.
Absolutely. I encourage them to.
Thank you, John, for your testimony. Appreciate it. Do you sell alcohol in your store?
I sell beer and wine. I have a second-class license.
Okay, so no,
We do not sell any paraphernalia or,
Eye test.
what was the question?
no vodkas, cause you went through like, whatever it was, whipped cream flavor.
No, the state liquor store is about a mile down the road from me. And so that's where I went to find those products that I talked about. No, I don't sell them.
Yeah, that's what we expanded last year, those flavored hard alcohols in grocery stores.
Yeah, my question was specific to the liquors and stuff like that, so it doesn't apply. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Good, thank you, and thanks for coming all the way from Stowe.
It's my pleasure.
How
It's
was
been an
your drive?
interesting experience for me.
Is this your first time coming to do this?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, well,
yeah.
thank you. That's great.
Have
I
you
wouldn't
walked-
pass it up.
Have you walked around the building then? Is this your first time in the State House? or-
I've been in the building.
You've been in the
before.
building before?
Yeah, it's a really cool building.
Okay, yeah, it is a cool building. Well, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and so we're gonna move on to Lindsay Stroud.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. I'm sorry I don't have any slides. I did not have time to prepare, but I do. You have my written testimony, correct?
We
It's
do.
pretty extensive. Okay, so I will just get right into it. So Chairwoman, Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time today. My name is Lindsay Stroud. I'm Director of the Consumer Center at the Taxpayers Protection Alliance and a visiting fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. So we're just going to get right into it. I'm going to go kind of over the youth vaping. So starting in 2019, many states began looking at banning the sale of flavored tobacco and vapor products to address the then youth vaping epidemic. The term epidemic, I don't really like using it, but it was correct to use in 2019 as youth vaping did rapidly increase between 2017 and 2019. But according to Brian King, director of the Center for Tobacco Products at the Food and Drug Administration, declared last week the agency is no longer using that term because vaping has declined. Unfortunately, and I've been tracking the youth risk behavior surveys, the Vermont Department of Health has delayed publishing the 2021 results, and it's been kind of wonky trying to track it. According to their website, the results were supposed to be published in fall of 2022. According to the website now, we're not going to see them until spring. It's really weird because other states, including Montana and Virginia, have published their state-specific youth risk behavior results, and they have found that vaping has declined, and also youth traditional tobacco results, and they have found that vaping has declined, and also youth traditional tobacco product use is at record lows. So nationally, according to data from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, which is administered by the CDC and the FDA, in 2022, only 9.4% of U.S. middle and high school students reported currently using e-cigarettes. Current use is defined as having used the product at least one occasion in the 30 days prior. Youth vaping seems to have peaked in America in 2019, when 20% of youth were using e-cigarettes. Between 2019 and 2022, according to the National Youth Tobacco Survey, youth vaping decreased by 53%. We went from 1 in 5 students using e-cigarettes in 2019 to less than 1 in 10 using them last year. Even better, traditional tobacco product use is at record lows. In 2022, 1.9% of youth reported current use of cigars, 1.6% reported using combustible cigarettes, and 1.3% had used smokeless tobacco products. Now, addressing youth vaping is important. Addressing youth use of any age-restricted product is important. But this same survey data does ask these students why they're using e-cigarettes, and they're overwhelmingly not citing flavors. And according to the 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey for Vermont, among high school students that were current e-cigarette users then, 51% cited using them for other, only 10% cited using them because of flavors, and 17% had used them because their friends or family had. According to the National Youth Tobacco Survey in 2021, among middle and high school students that were currently using e-cigarettes, 43.4% had cited using them because they were feeling anxious, stressed, or depressed. Only 13.2% cited using them because of flavors. Now, among students that had reported ever trying an e-cigarette, 57.8% cited using them because a friend had used them. And again, only 13.5% had used them because they were available in flavors. I want to kind of talk about adult e-cigarette use. In 2021, there was an estimated 17 million adult e-cigarette users in the United States. And in Vermont, 5% of adults were currently using e-cigarettes in 2021, which was a 61.3% increase from 2017. One of the things that I started looking at when I started my job was young adult tobacco use. One of the concerns about youth e-cigarette use is subsequent combustible cigarette use. So for Vermont, e-cigarettes first came to the U.S. market in 2007, and that was when 26.9% of Vermonters aged 18 to 24 years old were currently smoking. In 2018, when the youth vaping epidemic got declared, 12.6% of young adults in the Green Mountain State were currently smoking. Between 2007 and 2018, young adult smoking rates in Vermont declined by 53.2%. And since 2018, they've decreased another 43.7%, with average annual declines of 15.2%. They've mentioned some of the other previous bans, and I've looked at, once again, this young adult data. So between 2020 and 2021, young adult smoking rates decreased on average in all states minus Florida by 19.4%, sorry. Only 9 states saw increases in smoking rates among young adults from age 18 to 24 years old. 3 of those states are home to flavored vapor bans, and that includes Massachusetts, New York, and Rhode Island. New Jersey was the only state with a flavor ban that saw a decrease in their young adult smoking rates, but it only decreased by 9%, which is far below the national average. And while we're really concerned about flavors and youth vaping, it seems that we're kind of missing this mental health crisis that's growing among Vermont and the nation's youth. According to data from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, the percentage of Vermont youth aged 3 to 17 years old that had ever been diagnosed with anxiety or depression by a medical professional increased by 40%, from 13.7% of Vermont youth in 2016 to 19.2% in 2020. The 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey found nationally 42% of American high school students reported that they felt sad or hopeless for almost every day for 2 or more weeks in a row, that they stopped doing some of their usual activities. This was a 14.1% increase from 2019, as well as the highest rate recorded. It's interesting to note, because we do have the data that youth are using e-cigarettes to self-medicate the feelings of anxiety and or depression, yet according to the 2020 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, youth vaping did decline by 45%. So I understand trying to address youth vaping. I just don't think that flavor bans are a sound policy to address that, youth vaping has decreased, and also the reasons why youth are using e-cigarettes. So prohibition has never worked, and we should refrain from that. And thank you for your time today, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for focusing on some of the Vermont data. That's helpful. And we did hear from our Commissioner of Health with respect to some of that data, and the YRBS will be released soon. We're all looking forward to it. Questions? Okay, we're good. All right.
Thank you.
Justine Franco, thank you for being here. You are, I would just skip someone. No, I'm sorry. I'm going back on my list, and I'm going to Nevin Zablotsky. And then we'll come back to you, Justine. Nevin, thank you for being here.
Thank you for letting me speak today. So my name is Dr. Nevin Zablotsky. I'm a healthcare educator, and I presently teach and consult on the subject of nicotine products, addiction, and their impact on public health at a medical and dental school. I've lectured on the subject over the past 20 years throughout the country, but especially in Vermont, where I practiced for over 30 years. I've also lectured recently in Kathmandu, Nepal. They have their other problems, unfortunately. I've spoken to elementary students in Winooski and Franklin County, Boy Scouts in Essex Junction, junior and senior high school students in Richford and Enosburg, and students at the University of Vermont in the sociology department. The younger students are eager to learn about these products and have a sense that they are dangerous. As I speak to older students, they seem to be drawn to using them because of peer pressure, the excitement of trying something new, and to rebel against adult authority. Tragically, they're totally unaware of the dangers of becoming addicted to nicotine. The vaping products on the market today are a testimony to the ability of tobacco companies to make their products alluring to children and young adults, as exemplified by the Juul products, and they've been fined millions and millions of dollars now. They've added, and I also lecture on the science and the chemistry involved in this, and they've added benzoic acid to the nicotine molecule to make it more able to pass through the blood-brain barrier and use higher concentrations of nicotine. In addition, it also no longer irritates the throat and has a pleasant taste and smell, allowing innocent kids to find using it a pleasant experience, only later to find that they have become addicted to the product. On a positive note, California just passed a law prohibiting the sale of most flavored tobacco products, including flavored e-cigarettes and menthol cigarettes, as well as tobacco product flavor enhancers at retail locations. On a negative note, RJ Reynolds is now trying to skirt around this new law by introducing new menthol versions with a taste that satisfies the senses. The new additive is 200 times more potent than the old menthol additive. The other problem, I was overhearing someone say that the FDA is cracking down on this. The problem is that new additive has not even been, as far as I know, I may be wrong, has not even been evaluated yet by the FDA. So it's going to take a while to address that. I recently was somewhat optimistic about the FDA banning menthol products, but now see that they would, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read it and I'm a little nervous. They would.
Okay, it's okay. No need to be nervous. We're listening carefully.
Okay. In addition, it looks like it might take a decade to finally ban most of them, which is why I feel it's so important to address you. Given how many children and adults this will hurt in the interim, I hope that you will pass new laws banning these products this year and protect all the citizens of Vermont from the harms they cause. In addition, please increase the funding to help those already addicted to overcome their addiction. A couple of things just to share from my past experiences with my patients. I had a patient who smoked 2 packs a day, and she presented with a growth coming out of her cheek, and not to mention on the side of her buccal mucosa on the inside of her cheek, her tongue, the whole, actually it was the right side of her tongue. And to get to the point, if I showed you pictures, you would wonder how anybody could let it get that far, but she was afraid to find out what was going on. Well, she lost half of her tongue, she lost half of her face, and ultimately she died suffering for 2 years. Her husband, as a testimony how addictive these products are, he watched her go through this for 2 years, and ultimately his cardiologist said, if you don't stop, you're going to die. And he said, I can't stop, and he died. And I can tell you other examples of that. And I guess because I remember my mom said, why are you doing this after all these years? Why are you still lecturing on this and traveling and doing all this? And I said, because I just feel that I don't want to see other people have that happen to them. Now, I was listening to some of the statistics on the youth survey, and again, I don't know where these numbers are coming from, because I give lectures all the time on this, and I have to stay current, and they don't seem to jive with what I've been reading, and I have to read it all the time to be accurate. I have sympathy for the people who are trying to sell these products. They want to make a living as well. I intentionally looked up today as far as the statistics on that, and I was looking for tobacco retail sales in all 50 states, and it said convenience stores, the average percentage of sales was 12.4%. Supermarkets, general merchandise stores, 1.8%. Tobacco stores, which makes sense, 86.9%. Beer, wine, liquor stores, 4.4%. And all other retail types, 0.18%. So again, I have had patients who own stores, and we've had that discussion. But I guess and I'll just close with a few other things, if you don't mind. Many underage young people are getting e-cigarettes from retailers like vape stores, gas stations, and convenience stores, despite federal law that limits the sale of e-cigarettes to those over 21. New research from Truth Initiative finds that 43.1% of 15 to 20-year-olds current e-cigarette users obtain their devices from retail stores. And I'll finish with this. If we do not act decisively, 100 years from now, our grandchildren and their children will look back and seriously question how people claiming to be committed to public health allowed the tobacco epidemic to unfold unchecked. Thank you and I'll gladly answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have your testimony?
Yeah, you do. I may have modified it, but I think I didn't change it significantly enough for you to have to get a copy of it. Okay,
well, and the sales information that you have, the retail sales information that you have is very interesting. If it's not in your testimony, if you could send it along.
I will send you a link to where I read all that, and it gets in much more detail to it.
That's what we need. We need to know where it comes from. So thank you. Questions committee. You're good. Thank you, and thank you for sharing with us today. And we really liked your background.
Yes.
It's beautiful. It looks like the breakwater in Burlington.
That is actually South Hero.
Oh, it's South Hero. Well, it could be one or the other. There it is. Yeah.
Oh, I could have added today where it looks a lot different.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for considering this. I appreciate your trying to help.
All right, Justine, now it is your turn to testify, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I should probably just note I'm in an active office right now. So I may be needing to mute myself. I'm taking this time that I was not planning on testifying today because I was going to be working, but I just feel so passionately about this that I needed to voice my concerns. So I'm actually speaking off the cuff, and but I can transcribe my testimony and am happy to send it later if that's okay. And with references, will that
Yep.
will that suffice? Okay. Okay. So I should probably say I'm a school nurse. I'm an advanced practice registered nurse, and I'm working with one of the larger school departments. I work with adolescents. I have also been the COVID coordinator for my school district. So I have had my hands on a lot of students over the past couple of years. I've been doing this for 4 years. I'm trained in primary care and women's health. So yeah, I'm hearing a lot of things. I really do, like Dr. Zablowski said, I really do feel for the shop owners that will be losing, it sounds like maybe 12% of their revenue if we make this change. But more than that, more than losing revenue and that kind of struggle, I feel for my patients and my students. And I'm going to paint a picture for you because I am dealing with vaping and e-cigarettes and tobacco products on a daily basis. It's what I deal with most and the repercussions of what I see here in my office. A few weeks ago, I was called on my walkie-talkie out into the lobby, and I was told that there were some kids in the bathroom, and I needed to check on them. Well, I went into the bathroom and I saw in the one of the larger stalls, I saw many feet under the stall, and something just made me jump into the stall next to them and look over the stall. There were 15 girls that were in the stall vaping. I mean, I saw the plume of smoke. They quickly, one of them put the product in their pocket, and they were huddled into this stall. I should mention that about 5 minutes before I got into this meeting, I was called into the hallway to deal with what I was told was 20 girls in the bathroom in a bathroom stall vaping. So the reality is that we have students that are leaving their classrooms on a daily, hourly basis, and they are going into the bathroom stalls and vaping. So they're losing school time. I think this is something we can talk about the health, and I'm very happy to talk about the health implications, but we're also having students that are so addicted that they're leaving class. And when they leave class and they leave for 20 minutes, then they don't want to go back to class. So they've lost 20 minutes of class. Our grades are going down. They have been since before COVID. We cannot blame everything on COVID. The research and the statistics shows that our children are suffering. Their grades are suffering. There is something going on, that they're not staying in class. They don't feel comfortable staying in class. They feel agitated, which is probably due to the nicotine use and the benzene that's in the flavoring and the aerosols in these products. It is so multifactorial, the problems that are happening. So I want you to also know that when questioning students, I'm a good window. I'm more than a primary care person. I don't get 15 minutes with my students. I get all the time. I see them every day. I know their families. I know their relationship status. I know how much they vape. They're very open with me. And when I have talked to students over these past few years, 4 years to be specific, they tell me when I ask them how many kids are vaping, how many, they all say the same thing. Everyone. They all say everyone. Everyone has tried it. Everyone uses it. Maybe not all the time, everyone. So when I think about the youth risk survey, I think it is not reflecting. There are obviously kids, teenagers are probably not marking down their true feelings, but they are telling me what they're doing. And when I hear everyone, it's alarming, because if it's not everyone, maybe it's 95%. It's certainly not the numbers that we're hearing. I can tell you that. I'm working with very across the board. We're talking about the jocks, we're talking about the tech kids, the music kids, the artists. Everyone comes into my office. They're very candid. So, if I think about my 5-year-old daughter, I'm horrified to think of what's coming up for her. I want to lock her in a closet because I don't want her ingesting aerosols that are oils that are filled with nicotine, that's more nicotine than there ever was. The companies are addicting our children. The health risks from this is we have lung disease, we have heart disease, we have agitation, we have digestive issues. I don't know if this has been addressed already, but it harms brain development. These kids are as teenagers, they're so susceptible to addiction. Now, I think it was mentioned that the kids are saying that it's not the flavoring that is causing them to use it. Well, sure, they're addicted, but what started the addiction? What 10-year-old wants to just smoke? Well, okay, there's peer pressure, but it tastes good. It tastes like mango. I smell it all over the school. These aromas, cotton candy, and all these really seductive flavors. It's undeniable that is what is hooking the kids to begin with. That's how it starts. And then the addiction begins with the nicotine, and they keep leaving classes. I see them in the halls. I mean, I would say there is an epidemic. I would classify it just as a person kind of watching this. It's absolutely out of control what is happening. This is happening at all of the schools because I talk to the school nurses. I know that this is happening. We know what is in e-cigarettes. There's nicotine. We have the flavorings, diacetyl, linked to lung disease. We have VOCs like formaldehyde and benzene, which causes nervous system issues and shaking. I have students, they're constantly coming in here telling me that they're anxious. Are they anxious or are they just vaping? Really? Like we think we have an epidemic of depression and anxiety, or maybe we have an epidemic really of people vaping, and then that is a symptom. That's something to think about. But if we took away the seduction of the flavoring, I do feel like we would maybe be saving our kids. What we're doing right now is we're setting ourselves up for kids who are addicted, who are going to have long-term health consequences. Then they're going to miss classes. They're failing out of school. They're barely passing. They are not ready for society. They will not be productive members of society. I mean, this is just so much bigger than losing revenue. I don't know how we can change this, but really it is, I fear, I just pray, please, dear God, don't let my daughter vape. What can we do? Because the thought of her ingesting oil into her lungs, I mean, please, everyone that is sitting there, please think about your grandchildren. They're vaping, because I'm saying again, everyone, your nieces, your children, they are vaping. All of them, everyone. That is the consensus here. So please do not believe the surveys. The kids are they're not being honest because they're fearful about being honest, but they're being honest with me. They don't need to impress me. They don't need to impress me. And they give it a lot of thought when I ask them how many people are vaping. So that,
Yeah, this is terrific. You've given us a significant amount of information and from live from the school. We appreciate it.
From ground zero. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Gulick has a question.
Thank you, Justine, for your testimony. I just wanted to assure you that you've got 3 members here of the Education Committee, and your testimony that was very powerful is not falling on deaf ears. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Right. So, and you're in Rutland, right? Yeah, okay.
Yes. Can I say that? Is that okay?
Yes, no. It is important.
Okay. Yes, I am.
Do we have your testimony? Did I ask you that already?
Would that be the transcribed version of what I'm saying?
Yes, if you could send us just a brief, a page or a page and a half on your testimony.
I will do that.
Yeah, and because we have heard from the Vermont Principals Association, but it would be helpful to have your perspective as school.
I will transcribe that and I will find out how to send that to you.
Yeah, you can just send it to Alex. Alex is the one who contacted you. And we'll-
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, can do that. Yes.
all right. Senator Hardy.
Thank you. And thank you, Justine, for your testimony. I'm a mom of teenagers, so I totally relate. And I believe Rutland County has one of the highest smoking rates in the state, the last time I looked at that data. So you're really at ground zero.
Yeah.
And I don't have a question, but I just wanted to mention one other sort of side effect of this ip in schools is that often schools deal with vaping by closing bathrooms.
Yes.
And it creates other problems for students who need to access bathrooms.
Absolutely.
And that has been a big issue for my child. So it has this ripple effect into other areas that have nothing to do with smoking or vaping, just access.
Absolutely. Our nurse's office bathroom has become very popular because of that, but not a lot of people feel comfortable coming into our office when it's so crowded with the kids that are avoiding classes, which is all kind of part of this bigger
it's sort
problem.
of a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Things. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justine, and we're going to have to move along as we're bumping up against our time frame. But we appreciate your being here and look forward to receiving your testimony in writing. Thank you. So we're going to move on to Sarah Cosgrove, whose testimony is previously recorded, and she is also from Rutland. Okay, so Alex is going to put this up for us. And I just, as you know, just to let Owen Foster know, who is waiting at Zoom online, this takes 11 minutes. 11:50.
Oh, is this a video?
There it is.
Oh.
There you go. We won't be asking questions.
Wait, that's a person.
Yes, please.
Hello, my name's Sarah Cosgrove. I'm from Rutland, Vermont. I'm a respiratory therapist, a master level tobacco treatment specialist, and an asthma educator. For 16 years, I worked at Rutland Regional Medical Center as a tobacco cessation counselor. I ran the tobacco cessation program for over a decade, where it was recognized as the largest and most successful program in the state of Vermont. For the past 7 years, I have worked within prevention, my focus being tobacco and vaping prevention, primarily with the ages of 12 to 25-year-olds. Part of this position is providing tobacco and vaping cessation counseling to the community, to our patients of our medical homes, as well as working closely with our Rutland Community Health Center's pediatric practice. As well as providing counseling, I also provided tobacco and vaping education in the schools from 3rd grade all the way through college. I'm testifying today that I have seen the impact of flavored tobacco it has had on addiction and its impact on youth. So when I'm going out and I'm doing tobacco counseling, one of the first activities I do with people is a cognitive behavioral therapy tool. It's called the decisional balance. So we create a chart and slice it down the middle, so there's 2 columns. On one side, I work with the person working on cessation to, we write down the reasons that they like vaping or smoking and the reasons to continue vaping or smoking, their personal reasons. And on the other side, write their reasons that they dislike vaping or smoking and their reasons that they want to quit. By looking at the balance, we're able to identify, the reasons. We're able to develop and create a plan to look at the reasons that you like and want to continue vaping or tobacco, and start forming plans around those to identify your areas of weakness, to identify those difficult areas that are, that you still enjoy about, that addiction. So this decisional balance, over time, the idea is you start getting more and more reasons to quit using the product and reasons you dislike it versus the reasons you'd like to continue. So when I'm working on a plan with youth and cessation, and it has been vaping primarily as of December when I left Rutland Regional, that when we start this balance, I ask the teens, the youth, what do you like still about vaping? What is that you like? And the majority of the time, this has been my experience, that they say it's the flavors. I love the flavors. And that is one of the things that they like. And it's usually right at the top, one of the first few ones that they contribute to the reasons they like to continue or what they like about vaping. And then my next question, using the open-ended questions, why those flavors? Why that taste? And they often go into detail what their favorite flavors are, which are usually the desserty, fruity flavored ones. While I do see that plain tobacco flavor in the mix quite often, it's not usually one that, they're talking, a lot about, especially like the flavored ones. So the next tool I would work with them, of course, would be changing the flavor, because making it less desirable to them, you will help them in cutting back the process. So whether it's with cigarettes, whether it's with vaping products, changing the flavor helps, because it starts breaking those associations that you have and those habits that you've developed over time. Working with patients that smoke menthol cigarettes, vaping flavors, we usually try to shift down to a cheaper brand, a less fruity, desirable flavor, a plain flavor, to break that association. Especially with menthol, that's a difficult one, because the menthol cools the throat, of course, and doesn't have that same stingy that they would coughing, or would trigger that coughing. So by introducing another brand of cigarettes, they become very undesirable, because it doesn't have that same effect of the menthol to make it easier on the throat while they're using. I can also tell you that I have not worked with any youth that were able to quit vaping cold turkey, putting down their product and not obtaining some kind of nicotine replacement one way or another. I've worked with a lot of kids that have used nicotine gum, but I have not worked with any kids that have successfully quit cold turkey and walked away from the product. Worked with very few people that have, and when I'm saying this, I'm thinking primarily flavors. When working with parents, especially a few years ago when vape was fairly new products out there, one of the first things we would do was help them identify that smell in the air that wasn't, they weren't used to, the sweet smell of a vape product that lingers in the air for a while. It's one of those telltale sign kids are using, and we know that stays in the air for quite some time and can cause respiratory irritation. That sweet smell that lingers in the air is quite enticing and recognizable to kids. So I'm going to tie this back in. When we do education in the schools, as young as third graders we've seen using, we try to create the environment where open conversation is important. And, have you seen these products? Tell me more. That's my favorite line, is tell me more. And quite often in these classrooms, it has been my experience that the kids, once they start realizing what we're talking about when it comes to vape products, they're like, oh yes, my mother uses that. She uses the berry flavor, or my mom uses vanilla. And they have those conversations out there. They recognize the smell. Of the young ones that we've seen use these products or that have been reported using that we talk with, they have said that it is that smell that makes them interested because it smells like candy. And when their older siblings have put it down, they've tried some themselves. So I have heard directly from kids of the ones that have tried their parents' e-cigarettes or their siblings because they're interested by the smell. When we're providing this education, the teachers are in the classroom. I have my fellow coworker who works with me in Partners for Prevention. So there are other adults in the room, and we kind of try to talk through that piece. Also, as I said, we've seen kids as young as 3rd grade that have used products. They've brought them to school on the playground to share with other kids. When we've confiscated those have been flavored. When I go into the high school classes, it's almost futile when we get to high school because there are already so many kids using. And instead of trying to make it like a debate, we open the floor to conversation. So the kids that are using vape products, we can kind of help them change their view if that's possible. And also, you know, as they downplay the dangers, we have to reiterate, you know, there are real harms and we have that communication. When there is a group of teenagers that use in groups, I don't want to say it's a mob-like mentality, but it has been a mob-like mentality. They've come together and they verbally express, you know, we don't use those, we use this product. And it's been a learning process for me, quite honest. But a handful of times I have heard out loud that, you know, I will ask you, well, remember, when was the first time you picked up a vape product? When was the first time you used this? And many, many times. Oh, it was when my friend was using in the bathroom. It smells so good. I wanted to try it. When, you know, my sister was using, I smelled it. I wanted to try it. So there's always been that smell that's interest and then brought to the taste, which has followed right along being sweet and tasty to them. And then they gravitate back to these products. So while I am fortunate to spend a lot of time face-to-face with kids, I've been fortunate enough to be in places where they felt safe enough to ask questions, to, you know, give their own personal information. It's been very eye-opening and sad, the amount of kids that are using. And when you sit back and listen to these stories, these individual stories, there is a common denominator that I often see from early use. And you know, it's that interest in, what is that? It smells good. Ooh, it tastes good. And that just starts the cycle. I thank you for listening to me today. I would be more than happy to answer any further questions for you. I also want to just provide like a little nugget in regards to that I provide asthma home visits. And while a big piece of my job was re-educating family members that while vaping may not smell as abrasive as cigarette smoke, it is just as bad to an asthmatic's lungs. And that was a re-education piece because they were not perceiving it the same as being as dangerous to the lungs because it didn't have that strong irritating smell to them like cigarette smoke. Instead, it smells like bubblegum, mint, berries. So I thank you again for this time. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. All right. That's a lot of information in a short period of time. We'll come back to S18 at some point. Have it on our schedule. right now, we want to transition our thinking to Owen Foster, who is here. Owen, I'm thinking you're there. There you are. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to see you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. And so this will serve as your confirmation hearing for us to decide how to vote and possibly send your name to the full Senate for confirmation. And we know that you've been working at the Green Mountain Care Board now for a few months. We do have your resume that was sent along, and we appreciate that. So I'm going to ask Justine if you could turn your screen off, or because I think we're finished with S18 at this point. Thank you. Okay, good. So, Owen, I think we have your resume, so it's probably not a time to go through all of your experience and so on. What we would like to hear from you is a little bit about the work on the Green Mountain Care Board and the challenges that you're meeting with the Green Mountain Care Board, and whether or not you have identified yourself as being successful in the role that you find yourself. Why don't we start with that?
Sure. So as you alluded to, Chair Lyons, I've been at the Care Board since October 1st, so I think about 5 months now. In terms of the work that we've been doing since I've been there, we started off pretty early on with the Act 167 RFP process. That was legislation passed last year. We've gone through the RFP process, and we've now selected a bidder or bidders, and we're working through the contracting stage. So that was a first real substantive work, which is going well and progressing. We've been working with AHS since October 1st and prior to that, in connection with the new all-payer model negotiation with CMS. We work with AHS weekly, if not more than weekly, on that issue. And we also have tackled the all-payer model extension. So as you recall, the all-payer model, the initial one was for 5 years, and it has terminated as of December 31st of last year. And we negotiated a 1-year extension with another option year that would be a bridge to the next all-payer model agreement, should we get there. So those are sort of some of the early things that we worked on and focused on. And then we had an ACO budget process in really October through December, and actually continuing today. I think the board collectively did a really good job analyzing some tricky issues, and we're continuing to focus on that. We're also currently working hard at understanding our certificate of need process and our hospital budget process, and we're engaged in reviewing to make sure our hospital budget process is focused and tailored appropriately so that we get the best information we can to make the most informed decisions as board members, while not overly burdening our hospital system with the administrative process and the expenses that go along with that. So we want to be more tailored and more informed to make better decisions. So really more information, less burden, if you can conceive of that. It's difficult, but that's what we're focused on.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I know I've heard comments from time to time, both from the hospitals as well as board members, regarding the information that is submitted with the initial budget presentation and then ongoing requests that prolong the process for additional information.
Yeah, so first, with a big caveat that I have not been through a hospital budget process yet, and we have not finished our guidance for this year, but generally speaking, I think that's a fair characterization. There's an initial submission that's made to us with a lot of information, and then as the board goes through it, additional questions arise, and they may take any number of forms in any number of directions, and that process does put expense and cost and burden on the hospitals. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have at least a set of uniform metrics and issues that we need to make decisions on, and making it more uniform, right? So that at least at a first iteration, everyone's operating on the same music sheet. And I think that should get us in a more focused place without such costs on the system. I would add, though, that depending on the hospital, there are different needs and costs and issues, right? So if you look at the health network with 3 hospitals in Vermont and an over $2 billion budget, it's really complex. It's not so neat and clean that you can just send a set of questions and get one set of clean information and you're done. Things change. Healthcare is dynamic. What the hospitals experience through COVID, what the hospitals are experiencing with staffing issues, what the hospitals are experiencing with the care they're providing is not necessarily something you can put in a box off the shelf and handle. Nonetheless, it doesn't mean we're not mindful of it and trying to make it as rigorous as appropriate.
Thank you. I'm gonna let other senators ask you questions, and then I will have one more. Going back, I think I'll be going back to the ACO in a minute, but I'd like to have others ask questions first. And I'm actually going to turn to our Vice Chair, Senator Weeks, if you have a question.
Everybody.
Okay, that's fine. Senator Hardy, you have a question?
Sure. Hi, Owen. Thanks for being with us today. I have 2 questions. One is more or less a softball question, but I would love to hear what you have to say about it, about why do you want to be the chair of the Green Mountain Care Board, especially after now having done it for 5 months or however long it's been. Do you still want to do it? And what appealed to you to begin with?
Thank you, Senator Hardy. First, my prior experience, I was working on healthcare issues from an enforcement perspective, more focused nationally because I was a federal AUSA. In those cases, hopefully had a positive impact for Vermonters, but it was rather indirect. The work on the Care Board is focused specifically on healthcare for Vermonters. So I'd say my first interest is that I love the state of Vermont. I have since I was born, and I care a lot about healthcare. The second thing that attracted me to the job is that I'd heard wonderful things about the team and the skill set and the talent at the board and the staff. I think healthcare is one of the most pressing and important issues in Vermont. And so to have the opportunity to work on that with an amazing staff is extremely exciting, to be honest. And lastly, in terms of being chair, I had tremendous leaders in my life. I was really fortunate. I had Judge Cheryl Krause from the Third Circuit was a mentor to me. I then had U.S. Attorney Christina Nolan and Colo Karest and Julia Torti and Tim Blank. And having had such great leaders, I hope and have tried to pick up and emulate some of what they did. And so they made it look fun, to be honest, to be a leader, and they did a great job of it. And so I would say that made me want to be the chair. In terms of your second question of do I still want to be the chair of the Care Board, I would say that I'm enjoying the job more and more every day. It was difficult at first. I was inundated with a lot of issues that I haven't really had a lot of experience in. But the longer we go, the more fun I'm having, and I think we're making some positive strides. So yes, I want to be the chair of the Care Board, and I really appreciate the committee taking up my nomination.
Great, excellent. And can I ask my second question? My second question is about, since I know the chair is going to ask about the ACO, so I won't ask about it, but is about the certificate of need process and now I'm blanking on the name of it. The other process where you look for where healthcare resources are. The HRAP process. Those 2 processes, which are things that the Green Mountain Care Board is required to engage in, and the HRAP we talk about it here a lot. I know the chair and I kind of like that process, or at least the concept of that process, to try to figure out where the holes are for care in our state and how we could better fill them, potentially with non-hospital services. And what role can the Green Mountain Care Board play in that process? And it is related to your work on Act
167.
167.
Question. So good.
And then also the CON process, there's some, I think it's a really important process, but there is criticism that it's a sort of treacherous process. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts about making it less treacherous for people who have to go through it.
Right. So the health resource allocation plan, I think, is really critical in one, providing the care board information through which we use to make our regulatory decisions. I think it's also important to the public and to the legislators to understand what the resources are and where, and how we're funding different resources and where there are gaps. It does relate to the certificate of need process because it informs us of what we have and where. So, for example, if we get 4 certificate of need requests for a dermatology clinic in Burlington, we have information about what is already there. Is it likely that it's going to be commercially viable, or is it going to be a potential cost to the system that isn't going to be self-sustained and supported? So I think they are related. I think they're important, both of them together. In terms of the certificate of need process and the treacherousness of it, I think that can vary, again, depending on the size and scale and scope of the project. A lot of them, I think, are approved pretty expeditiously. Others take a lot more time to ask all the right questions, right? So I think there's been media reports of a large financial investment that the health network wants to make in a surgical center. So there's certainly need. Then there are other questions about the costs and the sustainability, the self-sustainability, the financing of it. Those kinds of questions take a good amount of work. So I think it's appropriate for the care board to make sure that we sort of balance ourselves and don't, boil the ocean on a replacement CT scanner, but that we take a pretty hard look at huge financial investments in healthcare projects, right? Because if there's a $150 million surgical center, that needs to be paid for. And if it's not, it's going to come out of commercial ratepayers by and large. And that's difficult for our state to sustain at this time, given the expenses that they already have in trying to afford healthcare.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering if the care board can sort of get that message out better about how many of the CONs are approved pretty quickly and are not a huge process, and that the ones that are because they are major processes or projects. Because I think people hear about the difficult ones and not about the easy ones.
Sounds like Act 250.
I was actually thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to say it because I don't want to.
The major.
Yeah, I mean, with the HRAP process, I feel like there's more to that than just the CON, than just the connections to the CON. It can be used for informing a lot more than just major projects. And we talked about it in connection with S37 in terms of where our reproductive and gender affirming care services in the state, et cetera. So as you do your job more, just leaning into that process more and maybe talking to us about how it could be improved would be helpful.
Great, I agree. Thank you for that.
I'll ask one last question, and I think because we do have someone coming in, but the question I'm going to ask is, you referenced Act 167 and the RFP that's gone out. I'm very appreciative of that work that you've done. The new members of our committee are not as familiar with Act 167 as are Senator Hardy and myself. And you and I have talked recently about your relationship in working with the Agency of Human Services to accomplish the goals in Act 167. Can you talk a little bit about how you are approaching the global budgeting process or the hospital portion of the bill? I think it's in the first section of the bill. You talk a little bit about how you see your role in that process.
Yes. So in terms of the global budget process, one, just for background for new members, the care board has 5 members, and due to open meeting law, we can't have a quorum, more than 2 of us together on any particular issue at a particular time, unless there's an open hearing that the public can attend. And so what we've done with the hospital global budget process and some of the other 167 work is we've divided it up amongst board members. And so Robin Lunge and David Merman are leading our work on the day-to-day of the hospital global budget process. There's been a couple different stakeholder engagement processes to inform the board and AHS in connection with that. We've retained some experts and some consultants that help advise us with that. And right now, we have started what's called the Global Budget Technical Subgroup, which is comprised of, I believe it's 3 CFOs from hospitals, the healthcare advocate, and Mark Hagee, and 2 board members and staff. And so they're taking information from the stakeholders and the community on that process to inform the best ways to design hospital global budgets. And just for new members, a hospital global budget is essentially, instead of just paying straight up fee for service, cardiology, dermatology, whatever it might be, it would be that the hospital gets one large chunk of money and it has to operate within that budget to provide all the care. And then there'll be analysis and review of the quality metrics relating to the population that's assigned to that hospital. And so, Chair Lyons, I think the answer to your question is we are engaged in that process now. I believe in the fall and winter, we should be getting some models from CMS, which would relate to this work. And I think they should be, I think they'll be available this fall and winter. And the models will be what the new all-payer model agreement options would be.
Thank you. Thanks for that update and for the way that you are proceeding on that. It seems like it's less cumbersome than having board meeting after board meeting after board meeting.
It is. It wouldn't really be feasible given the frequency of these meetings we'd have board meetings all the time. But what we are going to be doing is there will be periodic updates to the board on the global budget process, and the public will, of course, be able to attend and comment throughout those updates to the board.
Well, similarly, are you doing it similarly with the work on identification of community needs, or how is that working? I know you and I have talked about your work with the Secretary and AHS, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the other portion of the bill that's looking at primary care, looking at the community needs assessment.
Right. So 2 stages that are going on simultaneously once we retain our vendors. One will be the data analysis, and that's essentially looking at all the information we have to understand what kind of care is being provided and the expense relating to that. And also there'll be a second qualitative component, so quantitative and qualitative data. And then the qualitative is community engagement, where there'll be engagement with the communities, with the hospitals, with the primary care providers, with the designated agencies, with long-term care, with businesses, with patients. Everybody in the community will be part of the process to inform the board and AHS of what the community needs, the gaps that are there, what services they're not getting, right? We have gaps in our services in Vermont, and we want to fill those gaps, and we want to make sure that there's not excess costs being spent, resources being spent on care that's duplicative or not being utilized. How do we utilize what we have most efficiently? So yes, there's community engagement and data analysis. That's the first part of Act 167 that will be starting, I would anticipate sometime this summer. And it should take, we're hoping it takes 6 to 9 months, although that's an ambitious schedule and could take a little longer given the scale and the scope of that process.
Thank you. And unless there are some burning questions, I think we're going to move ahead. We appreciate your being in here. There are some challenging questions that we might have for you going forward. Not the least of which is how we are dealing with cost reduction and whether or not we're seeing that happen quickly enough. You know, everyone out in the real world, away from us and away from you, wants to see some lower costs to their health care, or at least something significant, instead of having ongoing increases. And unfortunately, you're sitting in the hot seat for some of that. So we'll come back to that conversation, but we do at this point very much appreciate your being here with us today and informing us about the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. And we'll have you back in to have a broader conversation going forward.
I appreciate the, sorry, Senator Hart, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to say I appreciate the focus you and the attitude you have about the ACO. And I appreciate that you are trying to hold them more accountable than they have been in the past. The irony of an accountable care organization not being held accountable. So thank you for that.
Well, that's our next discussion, and we want to understand, I think what would be helpful is to understand how you see the ACO participating in our all-payer model going forward. You have a different perspective from the Agency of Human Services on this, as well as from the CMS. And what the work that you're doing does appear to be building a greater accountability. Having said that, there's a lot of unfinished business should the ACO continue as an entity within our healthcare reform. So this is a broader discussion, and so we'll be bringing you back in and perhaps others to have that dialogue, or at least to get together about that. Thank you.
I appreciate the committee taking up my nomination. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for being here. Take care. All right, and so we have, today is Disability Awareness Day, and Kate LaRose is here. Kate, thank you for being here. And we have just 5 minutes left, but we'd love to get a sense of your organization and the work that you do.
Great, thank you all. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Kate LaRose, and I serve as the statewide pandemic equity coordinator with the Vermont Center for Independent Living. At VCIL, we are people with disabilities working together for dignity, independence, and civil rights. My work includes assessing current pandemic-related issues Vermonters with disabilities are experiencing, responding to the needs that exist, including for long haulers, developing resources in community, supporting people to advocate for their equal access to education, healthcare, and civic life. While we all wish the pandemic were over, that is simply not the case. Instead of a decrease in death and disability, we've arrived at a perverse plateau in which the burden has merely been shifted to those who are most vulnerable. Last month, Commissioner Levine testified before this committee. He provided an overview of the social determinants of health and the VDH definition of health equity. I'm asking that the committee members consider this framing as you listen to my testimony today. As a reminder, health equity exists when all people have a fair and just opportunity to be healthy, especially those who have experienced socioeconomic disadvantage, historical injustice, and other avoidable inequalities. All the negative impacts I will share today are avoidable. Earlier this month, the Biden administration announced its plans to end the COVID public health emergency, and with it, no-cost access to vaccines, testing, and treatment. But despite the prevailing narrative that the pandemic is over, we continue to witness the unfolding of a mass disabling event. This declaration will almost certainly move us from emergency back to disaster. And yet, we're repeatedly told by national and state leaders that this is progress, that we have all the tools needed to protect ourselves, and that it's time to quote unquote, go back to normal. In reality, we have done nothing more than to rebrand staggering levels of illness and death as something that is both expected and welcomed, the human sacrifice that must be paid by some in order to suit the desires of the majority. Our public health agency and news sources continue to report that our risks are low, even at times when the majority of the state are at high levels of community transmission. And I want to be clear, this is a CDC measure that VDH refuses to include in their weekly reporting, and this time period is the same time period as this. We are told that COVID will weaken over time, despite the fact that it continues to become more transmissible and more dangerous with each subsequent infection. When our leaders tell us that COVID is something we should learn to live with, what they actually mean is that it is something some of us should just learn to die from. And the tools we are constantly told we have, they're becoming less effective, burdensome to access, as with the disappearance of vaccines and testing, kept from us, or they're being pulled from the market because they no longer work. And the simple and cost-effective measures that continue to be effective, such as the use of masks in congregate and healthcare settings, or not having people work in those settings when they're positive, have been cast aside. Yet current policy response provides nothing more than vapid platitudes in the face of harm, with the highest costs being paid by Vermonters who are older, disabled, Black, Indigenous, people of color, rural, or low income. We've pivoted from the response stage of benign neglect to embracing choices that openly drive and increase health disparities, belied by our tacit agreement to force people into seclusion, accept high levels of death for all, and especially for some, and met out harms to adults and children alike. At this stage in the pandemic, we know that 1 in 5 adults will experience long-lasting impacts from COVID, with conservative estimates pointing to at least 31 million working-age Americans being impacted, and at least 4 million being shut out of the workforce as a result. We also know that children, which are experiencing the same rates, with current estimates of about 25% of kids going on to develop long COVID symptoms, and this will have implications in not just their individual lives, but throughout our educational system. The weight of loneliness at this stage is crushing, even while needed self-protective behaviors are pathologized by broader society. Worse yet is that the one immutable lever of change that people should have access to at this moment to help change policies, the federally protected civil right of voting, is also being withheld to many with disabilities at this moment. This is a map of the 175 towns that decided not to utilize the accessible voting options provided by H42. Voters in these towns will be unable to cast their ballots for all articles unless they are physically present indoors at town meeting day on Tuesday. In just the past week alone, I've been contacted by dozens of Vermonters desperate for access to high-quality face masks and tests, the right to vote, and safe access to education and healthcare. Here are just a few of their stories. A woman in her 80s with developmental disabilities who spent 3 years in nearly complete isolation, only to get COVID last month after accessing needed healthcare. She's still not recovered, and she's worried about getting infected again and dying the next time she needs to use medical transport to see her specialists. A retired veteran in his 80s who served as a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He's unable to leave the house, and he's being denied the right to vote on his town budget. A couple residing in an assisted living facility who didn't have access to masks to protect themselves. A VFW chapter wanting to protect their members and reaching out to ask for molecular tests and respirators. A child at high risk of severe illness or death who was denied safe access to public education, whose mother is now tasked with homeschooling her child and had to leave the workforce. VCIL is currently conducting an annual survey of our statewide peers. The results so far indicate that while the majority of those we serve are continuing to take the highest level of precautions possible, half have had COVID at least once, with the majority of those infections happening in year 3 of the pandemic. This is a direct result of society and systems which have prioritized the comfort and convenience of some over the health and safety of others. I know we're pressed for time, so I'll go through this really quickly, but I just want to mention that people are unable to equally access community life, grocery stores, pharmacies, medical and dental care. They're being shut out of work, volunteerism, and education. Revisiting this chart of social determinants of health, all of these concerns are present. People are being denied economic stability, neighborhood and physical environments that are safe, education, access to food, community and social contexts, and healthcare systems. And the outcomes are clear: increased morbidity, mortality, decreased life expectancy, increased healthcare expenditures, and so on. As you consider ways in which you will or will not address structural discrimination in the biennium ahead, I invite you to continually use social determinants of health and VDH's definition of health disparity as your measuring stick. Use them to demand accountability from this administration, our public agencies of health and education, and our systems of healthcare and social welfare. Use them to demand accountability from yourselves and your colleagues. As lawmakers, you must always ask yourselves and our state government, who bears the burden of our current policies? Who bears the burden of our inaction? I leave you today with the words of Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director of the World Health Organization. No one is safe until everyone is safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And do we have your slides?
Yes.
We have your slides, so this is good. And they're very informative. And in particular, thank you for your comments on long COVID. That is a concern from our constituents. So very much appreciated.
Thank you.
We're going to go offline.